Hello, everyone. I'm Troy Schneider, editor-at-large with GovExec, and I'm excited to welcome you today to this Innovation Spotlight, where we're focusing on future-proofing federal cybersecurity. In the ever-evolving landscape of cyber threats, federal agencies are shifting from prevention to rapid recovery and highlighting the importance of data protection and swift incident response. Today, we're spotlighting the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to hear how they are using AI and other technologies to strengthen their cybersecurity strategies. I'd like to welcome our guest today, Frank Indiviglio, who is the Chief Technology Officer at NOAA. Frank, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Troy. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. So thank you.
Absolutely. So I gave your name and title, but talk a little bit about the CTO role at NOAA, what you do and how it fits into the larger agency mission.
So I think it's the best job in NOAA. Other people would probably argue with me. That's okay. And I think if you ask 10 CTOs what their job was, you may get a little different answers. So I think the important part of what I do is really bringing in new technology, getting people ready for those new technologies to bring into the agency. Right, we have a really wide mission space from the surface of the sun to the bottom of the ocean. There's a lot of really good science that happens in there, and there's a lot of really good IT that needs to be there to support that science. Right, so whether it be edge systems that are deployed in space or under the ocean or the surface or whatever, or HPC that kind of brings all that data together and turns it into products that we all use, that we know from our phones and wherever else. So I think really modernizing that process, getting new technologies into that, it is the best part of my job. It's the part I focus on, and really that's how it fits into the organization, right? Every part of NOAA has their mission, or part of their mission, or part of their greater NOAA mission, and it's my job to help them get to where they need to be, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, NOAA is such a data intensive agency. I think this next question could have as many answers as what does the CTO job entail, but talk about the main challenges that the agency is facing when it comes to today's cyber threat landscape and the dynamic challenges there.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's certainly more than one, right? So I think there's two main challenges, right? One is not technical, right? It's people. People are any organization's most valuable asset, especially in cyber and technical areas like cyber. Talent, is scarce because of the specialization. So you really need to, and because the pace of technology changes so much, it's not necessarily about getting the right people, although that's important, but it's about allowing those folks to grow as technology grows, right? So I think that's the biggest part, right? Is putting together, not just putting together the right team, but creating opportunities for growth and experience are important for those folks, right? Not just not for retention, but just in general, right? Having a workforce that's interested, engaged, really working towards that goal, and the technology that comes along with that helps them focus on the things that they want to, that are important to the mission. So I think the second part of that is the pace of technology, right? It keeps getting faster. We've seen in the last year, right? If we were doing this a year and a half ago, we wouldn't talk about generative AI, but now we do, right? With the way the world changes, the cyber landscape changes with it. So we have to make sure that those folks understand what's going on in the world, how these tools could be used for good, how they could use be not so good, and really what's out there, what they can see, and how it can be used for and against what they're trying to do, and how it extends them, right? I mean, people talk about generative AI or AI being this replacer of people, and I don't believe that, right? It is an augmenter of people, right? So making sure that we have that technology, people are knowledgeable about it, and use it the right way. I think it's vital to a cyber strategy, but really vital to the people that enact that cyber strategy, which is the most important part of the equation.
Yeah, very good. And I want to go a little bit deeper into the AI potential in a minute, but let's sort of stay with the problem set for the moment. I mentioned in the opening remarks a shift in emphasis from prevention to recovery. And I wouldn't say that's probably not the right way to frame it, that it's thinking about both of those challenges, not one at the expense of the other. But can you talk a little bit about some of the, maybe examples of how NOAA has experienced the impact of cyber threats over the last I don't call it year, 18 months, and how that impacts, operations, data assets, and the work you need to do to secure them.
So, I think like any organization, right? And I think you said it, right? It's not if, it's when, right? So you
Mhm.
have to assume that there is some level of compromise going on, right? So, and I think in the world that we live in, that's going to change more and more, right? COVID kind of spread us all out and really kind of stretched systems. I think people did it well, and everything was secure, but I guess it showed us how we have to stretch that
Right.
perimeter out, right? How do we really address that stuff? So, I think with that kind of movement of the workforce, and then things like generative AI, there's lots of potential impacts, right? And they're not necessarily ones that we're traditionally, you know, I think it's true and it's not true, right? We're traditionally aware of them, but now they're, again, pace of technology, they're happening faster. We have to figure
Yep.
that out. So to kind of put it in context, right? And I think you mentioned it before, NOAA and the Department of Commerce, as a whole, right? Like one of the largest providers of public data, right? Like in the world, right?
Mhm.
Certainly in the U.S. And it's whether it's, the census folks. There's a lot of things in the department that distribute data, but I'll focus on the NOAA parts. So, I think a lot of the risks that we'll see, um, you know, outside of the traditional cyber um, risks are, delivering that data into these generative AI tools that people will use in the course of the day, and making sure that data is trustworthy, right? What I want to make sure that we keep enhancing is that public trust in our products and our data, and giving people products that they can use, right? Whether it be data sets or things on their phone, whatever that is. So we really got to focus on, how those data sets gets used in the public. Are you using NOAA data? Uh, are you, is it being presented in the right way, right? Can it be something that can be usable to our consumers, and really provide transparency how that data was treated, right?
Mhm.
Who owned it when, and how did it change? And hey, I got it out of the generative AI tool, and where did it come from? I think those are the important parts, right? We want to make sure that we're we're mitigating traditional cyber risks, but I think now that we live in this world where people can access data in a much more conversational way, right? I mean, up until, I'm not a weather scientist by trade, I'm a technologist, and when I got to know, I had to, and I still have to ask for help to kind of interpret some of the data that we process. Um, but now with things, like conversational based AI things, you can kind of dig into that data at a much deeper level with less of a technical understanding, which I think is a
Mhm.
great thing. But it presents a lot of risks for an information producer like NOAA, right?
Right.
How do we protect our users from everything else in the world that, whether it be controversial or not topics, they have to get the right data in the right way.
Right. And that's interesting. I mean, because you're talking not just about, how to protect the data from breaches, sort of what I think a lot of us think of as the traditional cybersecurity questions, but of making sure the data as it's being used out in the world is unadulterated and being used in the proper ways. That's a very different kind of challenge.
It is, and but the technology allows us to do both of it, right? You want to make
Mhm.
sure that you're protecting, in the tradition, that traditional sense we're talking about. But the same tools that we're worried about data getting into can now be used for that, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's about I it's a technical technology thing, and I start talking about people, and it doesn't really work, but it is the most important part. Like, how do we shift that AI tool set from being, again, not a replacer but an augmenter, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want my analysts and my engineers to focus on the things that matter to them, that
Mhm.
mission focused stuff, and rather than doing the normal day-to-day stuff. And the more we can automate, the better off we are on the traditional side, but the more we understand the tools, the better off we are on those kind of forward looking.
Absolutely. And are there maybe some examples or either examples that are underway or use cases you want to explore of how that type of intelligent automation can be integrated into NOAA's, broader systems and cyber strategies?
Mm-hmm. So I think there's a there's a couple things here, right? So on the workforce side, again, I think really looking at how we can embrace these tools So that means people have to understand it, right? So how are we going to train folks? How are we going to give them access to it in a safe way, right? There's a lot of, uh, technology. Like I said, technology moves fast. Policy doesn't move as fast as technology. So how do we set the right stage for this technology to be testable and accessible,
Hmm.
but really kind of work towards it? And that's what we're working towards, right? So on the non-cyber side, right, we have working groups that are starting up and working with the department and other folks to kind of really get those tools in people's hands. And on the cyber side, right, we've already seen tools come into work and really help out the analysts, the engineers that are working on the everyday
Hmm.
things. But really, I think the thing that stands out to me and always in these types of use cases is the way that you know the amount of data that we get, and now we're talking about telemetry and system data, not the weather data. But it's the same story for both. It's not just well, let me restate that. The challenge is how much can you actually do with it, right? You
Hmm.
can only process so much data. You can only have a person process so much data or people, right? So the AI really becomes now AI can recognize patterns much faster than people and can alert them to this, right? So again, it becomes it's not necessarily what you can do with it, it's how much more you can do with it, right?
Hmm.
And then same's true on the the operational side, right? We gather data. I mean, to give you I think it's 6.5 billion observations go into a forecast day, and that's only a subset of what we collect because we can process it that fast, right? So it's the same kind of I think aspect on the cyber side. Is there's so much technology out there. There's so much stuff generating data that we can't process it fast enough. So things like this can be really put into play to get people to address things quicker, right? So you
Hmm.
limit the blast radius, but also find things before they become real problems.
Right, right. Well, and I mean, the point about the number of data points that go into a forecast is just a reminder of just how much scale and how much data has to be worked with here. So it's a pretty clear explanation of or example of where the technology can help move this along. Are there any other case studies you want to like speak to, use cases or success stories where you and your team have been pushing some of these tools um, to to bring better results for these key missions?
I think there's lots of them. I think that not maybe not on the direct. Well, I guess it is a cyber use case, right? So one of the things that we learned from COVID, and I'm sure everybody else did, is people get spread out. They're going to work from home. They want to be able to do their jobs from home, the office, if they're traveling, and really giving them a platform to do that simplifies not only their lives but yours, right? So
Right.
a traditional enterprise, right? They're going to patch the laptop we're talking on. They're going to patch, if you go on travel, maybe they'll give you a laptop that they're going to destroy when it comes back. Um, and you can get to that kind of functionality through cloud services, right? You can, a modern IT shop can now deliver office tools and productivity tools without really a lot of heavyweight processing in the desktop, right? You can do the
Hmm.
Chromebook and then deliver all these cloud services. And that actually lets people do their job no matter where they go, right? You have a kind of an immutable desktop, and if it gets stolen, or something gets lost, or it gets destroyed or dropped in the ocean, which happens on a ship from time to time, but you're not worried about that IT asset now out in the field. What's on it, right? You can just turn it off and it's done. So I think those are the types of use cases that will really benefit not just the organization as a whole, right? We're reducing staff time on taking care of IT equipment, again, focusing them on mission stuff, and less worry about that perimeter or the edge where these devices live. But it also gives a lot more functionality to our users, right? We
Hmm.
one device, you can deliver as many services as you can get from a cloud provider or whatever onto that device. And really, it could be whatever you want it. If you need a Windows box today, fine. If you need a Linux box later for other kinds of jobs, yeah. And we're not paying for two laptops or two desktops and a laptop, right? So it reduces costs and really gives you the functionality you need across the board.
Okay,
So I
great.
think I think that's one of the bigger wins
Yeah.
for one of the bigger projected wins for us.
Very good. Well, let's go back to the people and question. You know, you touched on the challenge of, you know, finding enough talent with the specialized skills required. Um, and how can agencies ensure that they have the necessary skills and resources to leverage these new technologies in their cybersecurity efforts? And in particular, how's NOAA doing this?
Mhm. So I don't know if there's a one right answer to this. And I'm happy that there's not one right answer to this. There should be a lot of answers to this. So I think there's a couple of things, right? So let's attack it from a couple of different ways. I think for the folks that you have and the community, I think there are lots of ways that you can train people on the job, kind of in an interesting way. Like so, from our cybersecurity program does things like capture the flag events, right, where they're interacting with people that, the teams interact with people they normally wouldn't. On the engineering side, we do things like hackathons and
Hmm.
workshops where folks will go off and focus on a problem for a week, right? And they may pull in expertise from somewhere from another team in NOAA or another science team in another organization. They may even get help from industry, right? So it just provides people the space to really get in there and learn um, how how new technologies are shaping. What are the new software stacks we have to learn? But it also builds the bridges between industry and your team, between your team and your team, your team and other organizations. And I think that's where the real benefit happens,
Hmm.
where these people can kind of cross pollinate ideas, and you get what comes out of it is best practices, or at least a modernization of your practices. But they get both hands-on experience and experience that on a social setting to kind of really
Hmm.
explore a problem where they might not be able to do that, at their desk because they're fighting whatever the issue of the day is, right? So, that, and then I guess it's outreach, right? Like work with your, the local schools, with the local, other universities, whatever they are around your agencies. I think a lot of that is, helps bring in people, right? I think any agency's biggest selling point is their mission. I'm, obviously more partial to NOAA's mission than others, but I think that's the reason people come to NOAA, right? That's
Hmm.
the reason why people stay. So there's that outreach, but I think once folks have kind of understand the mission and they want to come support it, how do you bring them together to kind of foster them helping each other to move through their career progressions and learning new things.
Sure, very good. And for those employees that are really, you know, working hands-on with technology, are you finding that there's an appetite to build the new skills and the new knowledge about this? I know sometimes with new technologies have come in, you know, the early days of cloud computing come to mind. There were, you know, maybe a hesitation or that some stakeholders wanted to keep things the way the way they were. But are you seeing um, uh, you know, are you seeing your colleagues wanting to you know develop the necessary skills and understanding to put these new technologies to bear?
That's an interesting question. So I think so. I think it's a little different, right? I mean, uh, because it is so different. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, right? I mean,
Hmm.
even if you think from um, I come from a programming background, like it is a much different, right? Approach to even a science problem or a technology problem, right? You're interacting in different ways. I think so. I think that brings people to the table a little bit
Okay.
more than in other ways, right? But in the cloud, where does my job end? And there's a lot of discussion there. But I think this is one of those areas where it's a fundamentally big enough shift that people are super interested in it. And
Hmm.
to be honest, like it's one of those things where in the right, again, we go back to that augmenter or
Yep.
how do I make my do more, right? How do I focus on the things I want to? I think that's where it comes in, and
Hmm.
whether it be kind of mundane things like taking notes and all these things have their challenges as well, because you have to make sure that policy landscape matches.
Right.
But it really removes the kind of the things that we may not or people may not like to do in their day to day. I don't want to call them mundane, but like the normal things. It really gets them to focus on the stuff that they want to
Right.
focus on. Like for the engineers, it's that engineering problem. For the technical folks, it's how do I take care of the system or whatever. or get more performance, which is usually what we talk about in NOAA. But it takes you away from that. I have to worry about these notes, or I have to worry about this, the like the low level tickets that like everybody kind of gets, right? So it kind of brings you away from that and lets you focus more on stuff. So people
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
get to it. Yeah.
I would agree. I've been struck by how people have the interest level has raised from what the possibilities of these new technologies are, particularly when you get into things like generative AI, as
Mhm.
opposed to when the conversation was robotic process automation. It was a lot of job security. The people seem to understand the job augmentation possibilities now. It's interesting to see how people are trying to put these new tools into practice. Um,
Mhm.
you touched on, it's such a big shift that people are interested. What's most interesting to you? I mean, looking ahead, what are the trends or developments that you see really shaping the future of cybersecurity strategies for agencies?
Well, I think the AI, just the AI potential is going to be the biggest driver, right? And because all technologies can be used for good or bad, I think that's kind of the interesting part, right? We have all these tools, we can use them for great things to protect ourselves, but they can also be used as a as a way in, right? You could read about it in the news, right? You can read about folks with even fake phone calls, right? They're the computer generated voice things that sound like a person. It's hard to tell anymore, right? So
Mhm.
all those things are super interesting to me, just because it's how do we apply this technology the right way or the wrong way, and then how do we protect ourselves from that. But um, I think that again, going back to I think where I started a little bit, I think that it's going to be getting people comfortable with it, getting that policy environment to a place where we can test. Um, what I don't want is people not being able to get their hands on something because we're just not ready for it. We want to make sure we get that testing kind of framework in there, but really it's going to become an understanding thing, right? Yes, it's a great tool. Yes, it'll help you do your job, and yes, it will tell you the wrong thing sometimes, and you have to know, right? You have to check, right? So it's trust but verify, and you're always verifying, right? So really with the technology changing, and really putting understanding the importance of how the data goes in, how it gets out, how it gets processed, how it's presented, all that is educational, right? So there is that. I think that's going to be the biggest trend for us, and it's really not just a technology problem, right?
Mhm.
You're going to start thinking about, there's privacy implications, obviously, there's ethics implications, and that's not in the normal, right? That's not normal technologist chain, right? We don't go off and we emphasize a lot. We do where we want to be ethical, but we have to have them all at the table all the time now, right? Talking through from beginning to end, and it's going to become more of it takes a village mindset rather than we're going to go get this problem solved. To bring all those people together, getting talking the right language, uh, I think that's going to be the trend, right? That's how we get everybody together, and that's why I think events that bring people together, like hackathons and things like that, are ways to do that, because you can now get that kind of social interaction between those groups in something that's
Mhm.
not at their day-to-day desk, right? We're to go fix this problem, and then we come back and we all know how to talk to each other, right? But it's not that simple, but it's going to take time. But I think those are the ones. Um, those are the biggest trends that I think that's going to shape our strategies and
Mhm.
everybody else. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how do we fulfill our mission and how do we trust it. And
Sure.
at the end of the day, it's a cyber problem, not just a technology problem,
Right.
but it's going to take more than that. We need scientists, we need ethicists, we need lawyers. All those folks have to come together.
And you talk about getting everyone at the table. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier in the conversation about, the uses of NOAA data in particular by all the different services out there. And I mean, lots of agencies have their, customers of different sorts outside the agency, but the consumers of NOAA data are sort of, it's a huge part of, I mean, a huge part of what NOAA does, and a huge part of so many systems that are critical to how all of us go about our daily lives. As as these outside partners are looking to use NOAA data in different AI enabled ways, like that you alluded to earlier. Are those conversations happening? Are you starting to see the, you know, whether it's through conferences or working groups or whatever, bringing people together to start to address the data use and accuracy and security and privacy questions there in this AI era?
I think so. Certainly on the the weather and climate and fishery side, right? Those folks have been talking about it for a while, and it's mostly it has technical roots, so it's good, right? They're trying to get data to usable state faster, so they can do things like reduce the amount of computing footprint to
Hmm.
get to an answer, right? So there's all these like really great outcomes, but I think the crux of it, like you mentioned, is really being able to kind of come to a way for that data to be accessible. So we've had a couple, we have programs in NOAA to make that data accessible. There's the NOAA um, open data dissemination. Sorry.
Okay.
Uh, so they you could go and on a lot of the big three cloud providers and find NOAA data, and it's free for you to interact with. It's free for you to download. Um, so getting the data out there is something that you know we've been working on for a long time.
Right.
But then I think the real discussion becomes in what's AI ready data, and like that, the question I started out, if you ask 10 CTOs, you get 10 different answers. I think it's the same for users, right? What is AI ready data? What does it look like? Uh, and 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 that takes more, right? That takes the community, that takes your stakeholders, and really the mindset of like my value chain doesn't end when we get to the end of NOAA, right?
Mhm.
I send a product out, it goes to your phone wherever it may go, or NOAA sends a product out, it goes to your phone. Um, the value chain includes those people past that edge, right? So it could be a university, it could be industry, because the data goes somewhere to so many places, and it's so well used across industry and a number of industries that you really need to have that discussion. And I think that's happening, right? It's happening in a scientific sense. It's certainly happening, um, in the interactions with industry, and I
Mhm.
think even to the sense that you can hear it in the way NOAA interacts with the public. So the understand not the understanding, but the realization of that value chain continues is part of
Okay.
that, and I think it's
Good.
important.
Well, we are just about at time, but I want to give you a chance for a final thought. Any last piece of advice that you would give to those in our audience who are interested in kind of learning more about this important topic and strengthening their own cybersecurity efforts using AI?
Mhm. So yeah, well, I think looking towards the future, right? Again, it's about mobility. It's about zero trust. Obviously, will overtake this discussion, and it really kind of changes the way that things interact. It's not that it's not well defined. It's very well defined for the enterprise. For other parts, it may not be. So I think that's kind of the discussion. Like, how does this all fit into that? And then how are we going to prepare all this stuff for a mobile workforce, for folks that are going to be AI dependent? Like, if we look really far ahead, right? People won't do the things they do now. They're gonna talk to they're gonna type, but right,
Hmm.
they're gonna have a conversation with this application, right? You're not gonna write an application, you're gonna write an agent, right? So how does that change our IT and our cyber right stances? Because now we have a change in the way we interact with systems. We have a change in the way we're securing them. How does that all kind of work together? And that's kind of I hate to be that far out, but I think those are going to be the interesting things um, in the next couple of years, where data becomes so accessible now. You can dump it in a model and really churn at it much faster than you could before, and really get into it much deeper without that level of expertise that you may have needed before. So it opens up a lot of really great possibilities, but it also opens up a lot of uh, worry probably for some of the engineering folks that I work with. But I think we all have to work together to kind of make that work for everyone.
Very good. Well, I mean, lots more that we could be discussing today, but we're going to have to leave it there. Frank, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you, Troy, and thanks for having me. This is these are always great conversations. I really appreciate being part of it.
And I want to thank you, the audience, as well, for tuning in today. We hope you found this episode useful, and know that it is available for on-demand viewing. So you can rewatch it, share it with colleagues if you think they would find it useful as well. So we hope you'll spread the word about today's discussion around future-proofing federal cybersecurity. On behalf of GovExec, I'm Troy Schneider. Thanks a lot and have a great day.